Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today's guest is Aubrey Marcus, founder of Onnit, a lifestyle brand based on a holistic health philosophy he calls total health optimization. He is the host of the Aubrey Marcus podcast, a New York Times best-selling author, and the creator of the Fit for Service Fellowship.
Hi, everybody. Very few people today need an introduction to Aubrey Marcus, founder of the Onnit Institute in Austin, Texas. Famous for his excellent Aubrey Marcus podcast and author of Own the Day, Own Your Life, and Master Your Mind, Master Your Life, 12 Steps to Master Stress, Anxiety, Depression, Addiction, Anger, Trauma, and Fear. Like most of us that have been engaged in the world for many years, our career path changes and we progressively find our true heart's calling at each successive phase of our life's unfolding. This process and the need of our current times as we navigate COVID and all the challenges the pandemic has brought to the world, inspired Aubrey to start his unique Fit for Service mentorship program. Some of my students are also in Aubrey's Fit for Service program and have given me great feedback. And since I haven't had a chance to do a podcast with Aubrey in a while, and being in Austin for Sarah and Alex Rybczynski's wedding, Aubrey and I spent some quality time together recording podcasts for each other's shows. In this deep, insightful podcast, Aubrey and I get deep into what it means to be fit for service today. Some of the key points of our dialogue are: what is fit for service? What are the mission, vision, and values of the Fit for Service mentorship program? We then explore Ken Wilber's Wake Up, Clean Up, Grow Up, and Show Up model as it applies to Fit for Service, and how these concepts apply to all of us in the face of the changes in the world today, such as losing our freedom of speech, the sovereignty of our bodies, and our constitutional rights. I think there's a lot of gems being shared in this insightful podcast, and as usual, Aubrey really shows his depth, wisdom, and expresses his heart and what it means to be fit for service in the world today. There is something relevant to everyone in this podcast, particularly in light of the issues of the world today. Enjoy my deep, interesting, and fun conversation with Aubrey Marcus and learn what it means to be fit for service. Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today I'm super excited. I'm in Austin, Texas at Onnit with my buddy Aubrey Marcus. Welcome, Aubrey.
Oh, man. It's always so good.
It is. We had such an amazing podcast together yesterday for your show. If you're listening to this, you'll have to track it down. I don't know what he's going to title it yet, but I'll announce it when he releases it, because we got into some really good, deep conversation on lots of things.
And I learned a lesson yesterday. And the lesson is that during our intermissions, we need to be recording everything that we talk about during intermissions, because we had about a 10-minute digression into dragons that was not recorded. And I was like, damn it.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
But that's all right. We got many more of these to come.
I love dragons. So, yeah, I wanted to talk to you about your Fit for Service program. I think that's a really cool concept. And from what I understand from people giving me feedback, there's at least a handful of my students in your program, because I've had them come up to me, I'm in Aubrey's program, I really like it. So I thought, gee, that's cool. And of course I heard about it, and I can tell by the name, and I also know you well enough to know you're probably up to something like getting people ready to be fit for service. And there's a lot of need for that. So, it's a topic that's dear to my heart as well. So I thought today we could just talk about what does that mean, what's your program about, and then I just wanted to dialogue with you on a few key concepts that I alluded to briefly yesterday that I think are really relevant to the issues we're going through. In fact, this morning, Angie said, oh, you're not going to believe it. California just announced that you're not allowed to celebrate Thanksgiving or Christmas. You're not allowed to sing. You're only allowed to be in small gatherings for 2 hours. And I'm like, what the hell? This is like so backwards. It's mind-boggling that, my progressive, beautiful state of California is now acting like, some prison state, it's like weird. So,
interesting times.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting. I mean, for us, it doesn't really matter because, we got our own property and our own space, and all the people in our neighborhood they're like, oh, this is just a bunch of bullshit. It's just business as usual. I just feel sorry for all the people whose gullibility factor is high enough to ruin their holidays,
Yeah. I mean, but this really ties in, because the point of being fit for service is not just fit for service during the easy times, the
Right.
comfortable times, those times where everything is just kind of going according to the normal plan that we're used to. Being fit for service means that you're ready for whatever turbulence might come your way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of turbulence in the macro right now. So
Yeah.
what does that fitness really mean? It
Yeah.
means that you have the physical strength to actually, deal with any challenges like
Yeah.
we're having out there,
Yeah.
any health challenges. I mean, if you look at actually any of the statistics, of course, like the healthiest people are not having any
problems.
no problems at all. So part of being fit is, of course, starting with the body, something that we both wrote books. I think our books are actually two of the few books that endeavored to really cover, the basis of human optimization from a physical level. Own the Day, Own Your Life, my book. Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, your book. I mean, these are the two that are like, all right, let's take a look at the human organism and see how to get this thing operating right. And if you're following either one of those programs, which have an immense amount of crossover, then you're not going to be afraid of this thing that's coming. And so that's one aspect. Then the mental aspect, how are you going to deal with the world when there's fear around you at all different times? And how are you going to deal with your own potential anger that's coming up, that own sacred rage? Is it going to consume you? Is it going to cause you to stay static and not be able to move? Are you going to freeze in the face of that resistance? Or are you going to be able to stand up? And then also receive the criticism when you become that voice of what is now the minority, saying, hey, human beings, we need to be more attracted to life and committed to life than we are afraid of death. And then receive the arrows that come in criticism for doing that, and then of course spiritually as well, which is also, interposes and is the foundation for so many of these other things as well. Like, can we get beyond our own fear of death? Can we see everyone else as us living a different life? Like all of these are the pillars of being fit for service. So when the world really needs us, we're fucking ready.
Yeah, which is every day, because it needs us every day.
It does. And it feels like more so now than ever.
It does, yeah. It's like I said in our podcast, it's good that we're not having a world war where bombs are flying and body parts are everywhere and blood is everywhere. But the beauty of it is that we're having really a war of beliefs right now. And we're, as we've discussed, losing our constitutional rights, our freedom of speech, the sovereignty of our bodies, and even our homes. And so there is sort of a silent war, if you will, between freedom and limitation, really, So thanks for the intro on Fit for Service. If you had to kind of encapsulate what it is, how would you describe what Fit for Service is?
I think one of the biggest there's a couple huge missing pieces. And really the biggest one, the overview of it, is we're missing that sense of community, that sense of tribe.
Yes.
I mean, we were always in tribes for the history of humanity. And, a great anthropologist, Dunbar, he created the concept of Dunbar's number, which is that bands and groups of people gathered under about 150, and they could be part of a nation like the Navajo Nation, but each individual tribe was about 150 people or less.
Yeah.
And that was the amount of people that you can really feel that kind of closeness and vulnerability and affinity for, just naturally working with the hardwiring of our operating system. And so what I wanted to do is create that in a modern context. We're not going to all be able to live in the same valley or live in a commune like that. So we all have to gather together. But one of the defining factors of any tribe are rites of passage and initiations.
Yes, indeed.
Transformational initiations. That's another thing that's massively missing. Like, what are the rites of passage that we have now? Everything that's out there is hollow, or it's some kind of surrogate. You can join the armed forces or join a gang or be in a sports team, and you will go through hardship together and form brotherhoods and sisterhoods and bonds. But I really realized what the potential was the first time I did Wachuma with one of my mentors, Don Howard, out in Spirit Quest Sanctuary, who's recently passed and transitioned his legacy to his daughter, Selva, who's still running it out there. But I went in and I brought about 10 people that I knew, 10 people that I felt close with. And there was about another 10 people who were absolute strangers. And we went through a week, 3 Wachuma ceremonies, Wachuma Masadas.
Wachuma, is that?
San Pedro?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the ancient tradition of San Pedro before the church came in and called it San Pedro for St. Peter, the one that guards heaven's gate, right? Because the cactus
Kind
really,
of a paradox because it opens heaven's gate.
Exactly. So they changed it to San Pedro, but it's been a 4,000-year-old tradition that started in Chavin. And during that period in Chavin where the Chavin culture was ruling, they actually have no archaeological record of war for about 800 years. And one of the reasons were that all of the ruling class of the Chavin people would offer wachuma as a sacramental ceremony to all the pilgrims who came in. So everybody who came through the area was bonding together in these massive wachuma ceremonies. And wachuma, unlike a lot of the other plant medicines, is one of the most social medicines that there are. Like ayahuasca, it's really you and the mat and God, and your shadow. And you're in a dance, and then you can come out and you can talk about it to somebody else, but you're not with them in it. You're not sharing that energetic space, putting your hands on the same mesa, on the same altar, and looking each other in the eye and really feeling that. After that, I realized how close that we had all gotten through this initiation, through this rite of passage, this ancient Chavin rite of passage. And it started to come to fruition in my mind that this is something that we really need. We need to be able to start with strangers and then have some rites of passage and initiations that we can go through that form this sense of tribe, but then continue it on. Now, of course, we're here in the States and plant medicine is not an option. So I just lean on, for the current Fit for Service program, all of the other initiatory rites that are fully legal and don't involve plant medicines. So we're talking Temescal or Inipi sweat lodge ceremonies. We're talking shamanic breath work, ecstatic dance, and then like deep transformational kind of workshops where we're actually vulnerably sharing some of the deepest things in our heart, receiving that, holding that in love, and getting to really see and know each other. And man, the results of this process have far exceeded what I thought was even possible. I mean, people are coming together and forming truly lifelong friendships, myself included, because I'm going through all of these rituals with everybody as well. It's not a hierarchy, it's a round table. We're all together.
How do you do it? Are they meeting in certain places physically or web-based, or how do you coordinate with all this crazy COVID restrictions?
Yeah, well, we have a digital presence where people are in touch all the time. So there's different groups and workshops and breakouts and Zoom calls. I'm on calls, and all our coaches are on calls. Kyle Kingsbury, who's a good friend of us, he's one of the coaches. Caitlin's another coach. Eric Godzi, Vailana's another coach. And then we bring in other master coaches, and we're all always communicating and keeping in touch through digital means, through an app, a Slack channel, through a private Instagram. But the big, the gem of it are the meetups. And these are, 5-day experiences where we pick a city and then we go there and we go through all the different rituals. So we just gathered in Sedona, and this is a time where I really trust and believe in the sovereignty of individuals to make their own choices. So we did not stop during COVID. We just worked around the different policies. So, trying to abide by everything we could, meeting outside and doing whatever we needed to make this happen. But I really believe that now more than ever, we need to still gather and have community. So we haven't paused that at all. And I don't intend to pause that at all unless the draconian restrictions absolutely forbid it. But we're always going to try and find a workaround because I believe that this is essential. So anyways, we gather for 5 days. Day one was an ecstatic dance where Parangi was playing music and we were actually communing with the mountain and the sunset and the stars and dancing together. Day two were some incredible workshops about divine masculine and feminine archetypes, which went unbelievably deep. We had some guest coaches, Christine Hassler, Stefanos Vandos, and Anahata, and a variety of different individuals. Then the next day was shamanic breathwork that we led people through. The next day was a soul wander out on the land where we had a Native American trained tracker and wilderness expert who was guiding people on how to go out into the land completely soul guided and get the lessons from your animal spirits and just different plant spirits and different guidance that you might get out on the land. And so that was the core. It was four different transformational experiences stacked together, and then all the gatherings and meetups and dinners and celebration that was kind of interspersed in between. And it was absolutely incredible to just see people completely open up so many tears, so much love, so much laughter. And then at the end, you just see that people have this sense of belonging, like, oh, this is my tribe.
How long does the program run, and is it something that you pay for like a certain number of weeks, or how is it structured?
We do it in trimesters. So there's 3 meetups a year, and you can pay for the full year because it's actually a full year curriculum. So this year was the hero's journey. So every month was concepts on one of the 12 steps of the hero's journey. Next year is going to be a different concept as well. First year was actually going through physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So we have different curriculum every year, and then 3 meetups a year, like big summits a year. And then we have additional little smaller meetups where we just kind of gather, and it's more of a celebration with a little bit of content. So it's a combination of everybody staying in touch digitally and then meeting in physical space to share these, because that's where really the bulk of the magic happens, when you're actually going through, ass on the grass with your brothers and sisters and just letting it all go out.
How much is the year?
So the year for 2021 is going to be $13,500 for the year, which includes the 3 summits, the 3 meetups, and then all the digital access. And then if you want to just go a la carte and get 1 trimester, it's going to be $5,000.
So they pay for that, but they got to just get themselves to the events on their own.
Correct. And, we're at the point now, because we're limited by Dunbar's number, this doesn't scale. So there's, it's all an application process. So we review all the applications, make sure that this is somebody that's, going to be the right fit for the community. So you apply, and then, there's not going to be that many spaces for 2021, but there's always turnover. And then there's a wait list that's forming. And ideally, we're just going to get as many people who are really fit and able to fit in this program through it. And then encouraging people who, understand the model to then start their own communities as well, because this isn't something, we're not going to be able to serve the whole world with this concept, but we can be the model.
Yes. And we need something, like you said, the whole, and we'll get into this later because I have a section for that, but the whole, passage into adulthood in our culture is just absent. And so you get, as famous athletes acting like children, and politicians, a la Donald Trump, acting like a teenager with no manners and lack of parenting. And people are just, a lot of people just never really develop a sense of adult responsibility and the awareness of what it means to be a warrior. You have to be an adult, you have to know what you're willing to fight for, and you have to know that what you're willing to fight for is worth dying for. Otherwise, you're just fighting foolishly, and that means you just destroy your tribe and destroy the environment. And so there's a lot of things in our culture that are just badly missing, and I think a lot of it has to do with the corporatocracy and programming people to stay dependent and keeping them passive and distracted with media and, everything except paying attention to what's really going on, and I think that's part of the whole issue we're going through. Are you hungry for some amazing, nutritious, real food? Want something healthy and sweet for you and the kids? Do you need something that travels well, satiates you, nourishes you, and is easy to make? How about excellent organic protein powder to help you put on muscle and recover faster from exercise? Organifi offers all this and more. Make your life and your whole family's life easier and your health and vitality better with Organifi's excellent certified organic foods and drinks. Head over to Organifi.com, that's ORGANIFI.com, and look at all their amazing products and take advantage of your 20% Living 4D discount by using the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 20, that's capitals, all caps, Chek 20, during your checkout. My family and friends all love Organifi and know you will too. Enjoy.
There's a hero inside all of us.
Of course
and
there
I
is,
think
yeah.
that's, so many people in the armed forces, you were one of them. It's the impulse to be a hero. The problem is that it's guided by people who are exactly as you mentioned, who just have their own greed and their own ignorance and their own bias. And so you may be an absolute hero, which most of these individuals are. Every single one that I know is, every person who serves is. However, they're being given their missions by who? And that's really
The
that's
government.
really, exactly.
Which isn't even the government.
Right.
But by Bill Gates, basically. Bill's now commander-in-general of the world. He didn't even have to do an election. He just bought everybody.
which is the problem. But the key point is that there's a hero inside us. We're not really living until we have something we're willing to die for. That's what Sebastian Junger's book Tribe talks about. Is like human beings want something that's going to draw them together and be willing to sacrifice for other people. It's where we feel the most alive, but we're just missing that. And so when you start to form, this community, and then, maybe the enemy isn't an enemy that's pointing guns at you, but it's the enemy that's censoring our freedom, censoring our speech, restricting our autonomy, then you can start to say, like Cyrano did in his kind of final death monologue, where he's talking about all of his true enemies, because he defeated everybody with a sword, but his true enemies were greed and ignorance and bias and all of these other kind of non-physical entities, if you want to call them, but these things out in the world, and say like, I would be willing to fight and die for love and for truth and for compassion for all people and the earth and all her creatures,
Yeah. It seems to me that if I had to categorize who our big enemies are, I would say they are, one of them is passivity, just being passive. And the other one is really just a lack of awareness of the responsibility we all have to each other and the planet. So I would call it distraction. Those two seem to be what stops people from really stepping into their warrior, their genius, their hero's journey, their awakening, their self-realization, their responsibility to self, family, tribe, society, culture, world. I'm just curious what you thought are on passivity and just a lack of discernment, lack of action.
I think they're symptoms, actually. I mean, I think these are symptoms of a lack of purpose and a lack of belief in our own power. Like we think, there's nothing I can do anyways. It doesn't really matter. Like I'll give a good example of that. Like I'm not the best recycler. And you know why? It's because I've read reports that China has stopped processing our recycling. And actually the recycling doesn't have anywhere to go. And most of it gets rejected anyways. And so like, I know it's a good thing to do, but I don't have faith that it's actually happening. And I don't have faith that even if I do recycle, which is just a small amount to a big amount, that it's actually going to go where I think it's going to go. So I'll do it. And I have recycling at home and I have recycling, but I'm not like really litigious about it because I don't believe in it. I don't believe that I'm going to be effective. And I think that's one of the things that people is a trap. And, for me to become a good recycler, I need them to say, you know what, every time you put plastic in that thing, it is going to get recycled and it's going to have this impact on the world. And then I'll be like, fuck yeah, all right, I'm all the way in. But it's really a symptom of not believing that I can actually make a difference, not believing in the structures, not believing in the system, not believing in my ability to contribute to it, and not having, I do have a strong enough purpose to serve the world. I'm just channeling it in different ways. But I think so it's a combination of you have to have that strong purpose, like I want to help, and then you have to believe that what you do matters.
Yeah, otherwise there's no flow of current through you. If you don't have meaning, then it's like a light switch being off. When we have meaning, and you have to have some level of belief to have meaning, right? If it's meaningful to you, there's a level of commitment in the belief there that it's worth doing. But without that, I don't think anybody really can, I don't think there's enough spirit flowing through us to really do anything of any significance.
I think that's absolutely the key. That's the definition of purpose that came from, Viktor Frankl's study of logotherapy and the study of meaning and purpose. It has to be something that's personally meaningful, and you have to believe that you can make a contribution and an impact. And for all of the woes of social media, this is also one of the benefits, because right now, as you said, we're in a war of ideas. So the ability to share your ideas without having to stand on a block in the square and get actual tomatoes thrown at you, you can stand on your own platform, and yes, you will get, the proverbial tomatoes thrown at you, but those are easier to clean up from a physical standpoint. They still mentally might hurt, but we have the opportunity to fight this war of ideas, and it matters.
I just carry some salt and pepper everywhere I go.
Make bruschetta.
Like, yeah, baby, hit me with another one. Free lunch.
Yeah.
If you could maybe take these 3 categories and encapsulate them for me, what would be the mission of Fit for Service, the vision of Fit for Service, and the values? Mission, what's it? What are we on? What's our mission? What's the vision? And what are the values that you would say are the sort of the principles by which people in the Fit for Service program are in harmony with or aligned to?
Yeah, great question. The mission. So, as I was with Don Howard and going through all of these different Wachuma Masadas, he said, and actually the name Fit for Service comes from him, because he always said, in order to be of service, you have to first become fit for service. So the mission is to make everybody fit for service, to serve in whatever way they're capable of. And that means personally fit, physically fit, mentally fit, emotionally fit, spiritually fit, and then also having the community of support. So when we fall, when we stumble, when we're bruised and scuffed up, we have somebody there who can help us through either our own personal traumas, our challenges, or whatever thing that we're actually striving to change about the world, whatever our personal mission is. So really the mission is to help everybody become more fit and also have a community to rally behind them.
Yeah. So when you say become more fit, you're talking about physical fitness, emotional fitness, mental fitness, spiritual fitness. In the program, is there anything to guide them specifically, say, with how they should be moving or using their bodies, like exercise? And then, so I know just from what you've already said, you got a lot of pretty elite level instructors in the program. So that alone is worth quite a lot. I mean, just to bring those people on board sure as hell ain't going to be free.
Yeah. I mean, and everybody has, particular different strengths as well, even our core group of coaches as well. So of course, myself and Kyle, we're dropping in all of the tips and everything we learn about physical fitness. Obviously, a lot of it is covered. Some of it is just basics, Well,
it'd have to be. You can't cover everything.
Exactly.
Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. You're talking about 10 university curriculums if you want to boil it. I mean, I got a 7-year program that I wrote for my institute, and it's pretty full on, right? And that's exactly what I'm trying to teach over 7 years.
There's an immense amount, but the basics are, it's the doctors that you talk about.
Yeah.
It's doctor movement, doctor sleep. It's the food you eat. It's so many different things we can break down. And there's also different tips and tactics. And of course, the heat exposure, the cold exposure, all the hormetic stressors and the adaptation to those stressors. We take people through workouts. We go through different Qigong and Tai Chi and yoga and different hard physical exercises. We went out to a Army Ranger course and did a lot of the obstacle things at some point. So, and we're encouraging people to get that physical body there, because when the body doesn't have energy, when we feel sick and tired, it's hard to have the mental energy or the spiritual energy to do anything. We just want to rest and sleep.
Absolutely.
So we go through all of the different, techniques that we can to help bring people, get them to that sense of vitality and strength that they will be able to serve. And so every month, obviously the first year we focused for 3 months on physical, 3 months on mental, 3 months emotional, 3 months spiritual. But this year we actually interspersed it more. So every step of the hero's journey, we talked about the physical step of the hero of that hero's journey, the mental step, the emotional step, the relationship step. And then also the other thing that we really focused on this year was being financially fit for service, because money is, of course, energy. It's the currency by which we can do a lot of things.
It's hunting, right?
Exactly.
We used to go hunt for meat. Now we go to work and metaphorically hunt for something that has the currency that we need, which is something that allows us to buy what we used to hunt for. And instead of buying horses and chariots, we buy cars and airplane rides. So, I mean, really, these days, the hunter equivalent is making money because it's generating what gives us the power for tangible exchange.
And also the currency for service. I sat down here at this table, and Tim Ballard, who runs an organization called Operation Underground Railroad, who rescues children and women from sex trafficking situations, was telling me his stories. And I was able to cut him a $100,000 check for his organization. And I'm not as filthy rich as people think I am, but I had that currency that I was able to provide. So even though I'm not going to be able to go on missions with him into Haiti, into the belly of the beast, and actually pull children out of these situations like he does, I can support him with that. And I think that's another big impetus for, for Fit for Service, is like, get yourself financially fit that you can do whatever you need, that you have the freedom to work on whatever ideas and make the posts and write the things and do the documentaries or, hold the gatherings. But also, if you have surplus, you can help the people who are doing things that you can't do anything personally with other than, just support them in their mission as well. So it's a big part of it.
Yeah. Money's like the fuel that makes the rocket fly, right? So $100,000 donation is a lot of rocket fuel, and it gets a lot done.
It's gonna save some kids.
Yeah.
It will actually do that. And what better thing to think about? I've bought a lot of things in my life, and a lot of things I love. I love my car, I love my Tesla and things like that. But there's a deep satisfaction knowing that I was able to have a level of abundance in my life that I could help him out and help, Dr. Harry Grammer, who's running, centers for youth that are transitioning out of juvenile detention and really running programs out in Los Angeles. Like, I'm able to help people with those resources. And, that's a gift that I hope many, many people get to share in as well. And, so of course, supporting the MAPS organization that's pushing legalization of MDMA, the Hefter organization pushing the legalization of psilocybin. There's so many great causes out there, and to have that abundance available, it's another aspect of being fit for service. So we've really focused on that a lot. And we got a ton of amazing entrepreneurs, not just myself, but a lot of experts in there as well. And also community groups. I think we did a poll at the end of 2019, and 40% of all of the members formed a new business partnership with an existing member, which
fantastic.
Is an astronomical.
That's really amazing.
Astronomical number.
How many are in it so far?
So it never goes above 150, and it's kind of like a rolling.
That's your tribal.
That's the tribe. Yeah, that's the ceiling. That's the ceiling. Yep.
That's pretty good. That's still a good number. You think of the knock-on effect of 150 wise people, and it's a lot. We can see from current leaders that one unwise a person can do a lot of damage. So a wise one can do a lot of good. If you had to encapsulate the vision, what's the vision?
The vision is that this becomes a model that's replicated, right? The vision is that this is something that we're offering and showing and kind of open sourcing what we're doing, and that 10 of these spring up, then 100 of these spring up, then 1,000 of these spring up, where there's all kinds of these intentional communities going through these safe transformational initiation practices together and forming these bonds. And then when everybody has gone through all of these different programs, then ultimately, that someone, even though they may not be in your tribe, they're part of a tribe that's pushed them into the deepest parts of their shadow and their vulnerability, and had them experience and share all of these different aspects of community that we don't often see. And so I envision having big powwows like the Aboriginal people did in Australia, where everybody would gather at Uluru, or in our culture, they would have big Native American powwows where they would just gather. And it may not be your tribe, but it would be all the people coming together of shared similar values and a celebration and a sharing of ideas. And I see, the ultimate vision would be to see that spreading around the world, where everybody who's become a part of this can start their own community, whether that's a small 5, 10 people, or whether they form bigger ones as well, and they get their full 150 outside of this. But just to see it really spread and really put the value of community and tribe and rite of passage back in the forefront of our mind, away from, it's really the opposite direction than everything is going right now. Stay isolated, stay distanced. If you're going to have sex with someone, use a glory hole. That was actually advice from the British Columbia Health Canada. They said the safest sex to have is to cut a hole in a wall and put your penis through the wall and then have the other person have sex with you through the wall. It's a glory hole. That literally, I'm not making this up. That was literal advice from the government.
You know, I'm trying to find a polite way to say that only shows us that what we think of as government has turned into something more ridiculous than a school for preschoolers. I could break that down into such ridiculousness in seconds. And the fact that 99.9% of people with even more than 2 neurons holding hands would never do that because it's just so stupid. It's not even stupid. There's not a word for that level of stupidity. And from the Canadian government, that shocks me because I grew up in Canada. They're usually more sane than most. But it just goes to show you that the level of corruption and manipulation and greed and malintent from whoever's behind the whole COVID thing is reaching a level of disgust that what I hope is that the rational people of the world look at a directive like that and say, okay, we've reached the point where we can't even trust any of these people. We have got to take the situation into our own hands, which would then return back to the local tribal development and say, what are we going to do here in our neighborhood? Because I've seen that already happening.
Yeah. And I think that's the call. That's the clarion call that's coming. I mean, the ridiculousness is really, if you really think about it, like, how do you even do that? What do you get, one of those, like a borehole? Do you just drill something in your bathroom and be like, listen, I'll leave the front door open. I'll meet you on the other side of this bathroom wall. You go in the bedroom, I'll go in here, and I'll put my dick through my wall. And then you get access to whatever inches are on the other side of it, and go to town with it.
I hate to tell you guys, but I've built lots of buildings, and the distance between the one side of a wall and the other side of the wall is about the average man's penis. And oh, by the way, a lot of these walls are full of fiberglass called insulation, so you're going to have about a month to remember what your dick went through, and your poor girl is going to be completely and utterly frustrated, which is why I often tell the joke. I think I probably told it to you before, the definition of something.
No.
You put your left hand on the base of your dick and your right hand on top of it, and whatever's sticking out, now that's something. And in this case, it's the wall joke, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, oh my God. I honestly, it deeply concerns me that the people given these kinds of directives have the power to start wars and have access to nuclear weapons. I mean, this should make us all deeply concerned. The beauty of it is that we're all getting, really for the first time, a public expose of just how out of control our governments are, and our medical system is, and our emergency systems are. I mean, the old saying, the devil you know is always better than the devil you don't know. And we're getting to meet the devils that have created themselves due to the passivity and lack of paying attention to where our tax dollars are going, who's using them, basically not getting involved. And I completely appreciate that the world's gotten so complicated. It's like, I'm looking at this election stuff and going, I can't even vote for any of these people. There's like, most of what's going on here to me is just completely ridiculous. It's like someone saying, okay, which hand would you like cut off, your right or your left? Your left ball or your right ball? I'm like, what's happening? And, we've created a political system where it takes so damn much money to even be a legitimate contender, that if you're not backed by some massive corporation or a number of them, you could be the best candidate in the world, but you're going to be just completely squashed relative to airtime that the morons get. So it's somehow we've got to collectively level the playing field and take our power and our sovereignty back. Because if we don't do it, this is just a very good peek into the future. I mean, the future is everyone's going to have paper thin walls in their houses.
Yeah, right.
We're going to be living in Japanese dwellings.
Yeah, no doubt.
Hi, everybody. Apple cider vinegar is like a panacea that's been shown through all sorts of research to help with just about anything. And I personally love this stuff. I found it very, very beneficial on many levels. And Paleo Valley's apple cider vinegar complex is absolutely awesome. And I've got Autumn Smith, their founder, here right now to tell you why it will be a great addition to your life. Autumn, what is it about your cider vinegar complex that we should all know about?
Well, I created the apple cider vinegar complex because I was on a mission to not only live as long as possible, but to feel amazing when I did that. And I learned about apple cider vinegar's incredible ability to help keep our blood sugar very nice and stable, which is one thing we know people who live long, healthy lives have. And then I added organic cinnamon and organic ginger and organic turmeric, all that have different benefits of their own, from anti-inflammatory properties to brain benefits. And we put them all into capsules so that you could take it and then have your digestion feel better. You could have more energy. You could avoid the ups and downs all day long because you have that nice stable blood sugar. And of course, another interesting side is that apple cider vinegar may actually be able to help your body break down glyphosate. So there are so many different ways that you can use this product and reasons that you might. And the reason it's so important to me is because I want food to be used as medicine. And so we can encourage our bodies to do all of these amazing things simply by the addition of the apple cider vinegar complex.
Well, I also love that you have ginger in there because it's a very effective anti-parasitic. And today, with the amount of processed food people are eating, it's a really good idea to have some ginger in your diet. So I love this product myself. I use it every morning. And Autumn, where can people get it and what's their discount?
You guys can all save up to 15% off with the checkout code Chek. That's lowercase CHEK 15. And I just wanted to mention too, the number one thing I hear from people is that this complex helps them reduce cravings. So I hope you all love it.
Yes. So go to Paleo Valley, PALEO Valley.com and get your 15% discount. And I hope you love it as much as I do.
Here's the thing, right now everybody's looking at two candidates, and this is the big problem. We have two candidates that are just the figurehead of a giant machine, and this giant machine which collects massive revenues and has huge billion-dollar lobbyings from pharmaceutical companies and everything, and they're all just representatives of this massive machine instead of it just being people. And I think this idea of parties is a disaster because then you have to follow the party line and there's so much leverage and there's so much sacrifice of your own beliefs. Because right now there's a candidate who's a libertarian candidate, Jo Jorgensen, and I've been looking at her stuff and I haven't done the deepest dive, but it's phenomenal.
That's what I was told too.
Everything she's saying is just wow, this is phenomenal. But guess what? She's not there on the stage. Nobody knows about her. She's not a viable option. So everybody's like, well, which one do you choose? This idiot or this idiot? It's no, there's actually other people who are on the ballot, but we're not giving them any attention. Yeah. They don't have a big enough machine behind them and enough media and enough manipulation that we're actually considering it. And until a third party, at least a third party, breaks the yoke of this two-party system, we're in trouble. Yeah. And then the government beyond that is they're hiding behind these organizations. Ultimately, back in the day, your representatives, you knew them. They went to the tavern with you and you could talk to them. If someone put out some crazy ass policy like recommending glory holes for sex, you could go up to them as they're drinking a beer and be like, what the fuck were you thinking, man? And you'd be like, well, I don't know. I just thought it was safe. And you're like, what?
What I would say is take me to your house and show me yours.
Yeah, exactly. And they would have some accountability. But right now you just put it out on these blank websites and you could send in an email to the contact form potentially, and would it ever get answered? No, there's no accountability to the policy making that's actually happening. They're not part of the people. They're just these figureheads of these massive organizations, the political ones, the media organizations, the lobbying organizations. it's a big problem that we have. But as you said, it's being exposed.
Yeah.
And it's all in front of our face now. So now, when we decide not to be passive, to go back to what you're saying as well,
Yep.
and to actually take action and say, no, fuck this.
There's, the thing is that the number of people behind this whole thing, from COVID to everything we're talking about, really is a small number of people compared to the rest of us, right? There's about 7 billion people on the planet. And there's a handful of people pulling the strings at the top of this whole pyramid. But, a colony of ants can destroy a herd of elephants, no problem. And so even if they're a herd of elephants, when enough of us just say that's enough and say, we're not doing that, take off your mask, get back to work, be productive, and let's create our own government. We've got to get all this corporate crap out, and we have to create a government system where each candidate gets equal airtime, equal opportunity. So there's no corporate manipulation. When you look at people like Bill Gates and how they can completely manipulate the media and how these corporations can buy off anybody, they buy off judges, they buy anything they want to create whatever they want, which is really a disaster. One of the things that irritated the piss out of me is I'm part of many of these different watch groups from Native American tribes and groups that are just concerned about nature. And while COVID was going on and everybody was distracted, Donald Trump was removing the protection on parklands and nature preserves so that people could start doing fracking and drilling in them. I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. And so they keep creating all these sort of disaster scenarios to get people's eye off the ball. And then they run these law through. Well, nobody's paying attention. They're too scared to death to even think about it. And they were putting 5G systems in schools all over the place. It's just, we really have to, we're either going to be pushed into a situation where we really collapse of isolation and turn into a world full of psychopaths because of the fact that everything we're being told to do. It almost makes me feel like we're having some kind of an alien invasion from an intelligence that has no need for human connection or even nature. It's really almost like a robotic kind of mentality.
Well, that's the ego, though. I mean, the ego knows itself only in relative position to others. The ego is the one that says, I am not God. That's the purpose of the ego.
Yes.
That's the ego says, I am not God. So if God is everybody else, it's saying, I am not any of you. And it defines its worth in relative position. It defines its worth as better than everybody else. And so we have an ego invasion where people have forgotten the other aspect. Like, yeah, of course, we all have egos. That's the tension. That's the dance. That's the yin and the yang. That's the I am not God. And then there's the spiritual part of us, our soul, that says I am God. And both of those need to dance in harmony together so we can experience God. But right now, ego is just on a fucking rampage and it doesn't care about other people. It's living in a universe of one. It says, I am the only thing that exists. It's trying to become God itself rather than recognizing the God that exists.
Yes. And, one need only spend a few hours in any good book on mythology to see where that leads.
Right?
Dismemberment and death, hopefully followed by rebirth. But, and that's really what we're going through. We're going through a dismemberment right now. Really. We got to dismember every belief system and behavior that is not inherently good for the collective. So we need to go through a dismemberment. Like I was saying, I think in our podcast, there's no more political system. You're voting with what you put your money into. That's the only thing that has any power. And a lot of these corporations are like dragons with big appetites. But the real spiritual warrior behavior, in my opinion, is having the discipline not to put money into the hands of people that you're used to putting in the hands of because it makes your life easy, right? So how do you use your iPhone in ways that are conducive to creating wholeness and connection, but not use it in ways that are conducive to being spied on and to being manipulated and to spending money that you don't have and the long list of ways that are negative? How do you use the internet as a means of communicating truth, wisdom, inspiration, and support, versus using the internet to just bash people and, as a means of distraction and as a means of getting your head full of ideas that are really part of their false propaganda campaign, right? So we have the tools that have created the enslavement that actually, if used intelligently, will create the freedom. And then, of course, we have to fight for our freedom of speech because, as you very well know, a lot of the greatest minds in the world telling us the truth about COVID and all this stuff are being immediately taken off the internet. And that, to me, is one of the biggest threats there is. Like, when you start taking away freedom of speech and you start taking away the sovereignty for a person to choose what they get vaccinated with or not, what drugs they take or not, what procedures they use or not, you now are no longer in a democracy, and you're in something else, and that something else smells a lot like a prison to me.
And we talked about it on the podcast we did for my show yesterday, but it's part of James Carse's definition of evil.
Yes.
Which is, these tools are inherently neutral. YouTube, it's neutral. It's a great tool. Instagram, neutral, great tool. However, when you have people in power who are then using that to restrict and squash other people's voices and actually change the rules of the game, slant the rules of the game so that it's not a fair game anymore. It's a tilted game. It's like a casino that has loaded dice where you can never win, or a slot machine that never rolls, never gives you cherries. It's creating a game under the auspices, this is a place to share ideas. But it's manipulating it straight through. So it's still a tool, but we have to understand that right now the odds are being slanted against us. So we have to play the game with care.
Yes, and like Brian Rose did at London Real, he created his own platform that they couldn't manipulate, as has people like Joe Mercola and many others. So the thing is, by definition, whenever a game is going on, both parties on either side agree to the same set of rules, or you don't have a game. You have two games and not everybody knows which one they're playing, which is exactly what's going on right now. Except it might be more than two games, because we're not agreeing to glory holes, and we're not agreeing to masks, and we're not even agreeing to the bullshit about what they are saying is really going on, the virus this and the virus can infect you that way. I mean, when you start listening to the brightest minds out there like Zach Bush, Dr. Tom Cowan, and a long list of them, and Mickey Willis's Plandemic documentary, and there's Bruce Lipton, and I mean, there's a lot of really, really sharp people that should be getting a lot of airtime. But when you start listening to people that have much bigger hearts and are clearly not in it just to manipulate people, a lot of them are sharing their love and wisdom for no money. I mean, I put almost 600 videos on YouTube for free because my interest is in supporting people. So when you see how much great information and great wisdom is out there, but how quickly it's being taken down and how quickly they're using so-called fact checkers to discredit a lot of these people, it's point being is that there's different games being played at once, but the game that everybody's supposed to be playing is the one that the government wants you to play because there's penalties for not playing that game. So because the government is supposed to be of the people, for the people, and it's not, we really don't have a government anymore. We have a corporate headquarters, and that, I studied the biography of Adam Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with Adam Smith. He was the first economist. And he said right in his biography, he had never been to a meeting, any kind of government meeting where there were corporate heads, where the conversation was not how to get more money out of people. And he said there was no concern whatsoever for the impact that their strategies would have on them. In other words, they didn't care if they broke them as long as they got them to buy stuff. So his warning was corporations and big business should never be allowed in government. And we know that religion should not be allowed into government as a means of making moral choices, because those choices are too polarized against other religions. So we really actually all the greatest minds in the formation of government and even our Constitution have warned us against everything that's ever happening for the very reasons it's happening. So, it seems to me that we have to start governing ourselves in ways that are congruent with what we need, not only for the planet, but what we need for each other. And from there, enough people will start standing in unity, like your fit for service concept, and we will start realizing that we all, aren't stupid enough to fall for the germ theory and the proposed medical model of the virus, which is really just designed to sell more drugs and vaccinations. It has nothing to do with the truth. We will then realize we have the same needs for the planet. I think of the world, let's call the world the game board or the dream board. We all come here as souls to live out our dreams and grow spiritually and learn from relationship and learn to manage the powers of consciousness within us. But when you look at the board, you say, okay, what does it take to keep the world as a healthy stage for the play of our own spiritual growth and development? You got to have healthy soil. You got to have clean water. You got to have healthy air. And you got to not do things that disrupt the atmosphere, such as greenhouse effects and pollution and things like that. So it seems to me that those are the things that everybody, regardless of race, color, creed, tribe, nation, corporation, all need for not only our own survival, but each other's survival and the survival of the ecosystem that allows us to have this game field. So my dream is that all of this brings us to the point of realization, and it concerns me because we're being distracted from what's happening in nature. We're being distracted from how close the planet is to a major ecological crisis, like, an extinction crisis, because we're getting caught up in all the COVID and all the racism and all the smoke and mirrors. But I think that there's enough people waking up, and a program like yours is really good for waking people up to come to the realization, okay, it doesn't even matter if you work for biotech and your goal is to vaccinate everybody. If you don't realize that none of that's going to matter if we don't start taking care of the planet and start taking care of each other and come to some sort of a unified understanding of what health is and bring our education systems up to speed on things like viruses and the uses of technology and the science of mind and what quantum physics tells us about the world. I mean, our education systems are operating 10, 20 plus years behind what we actually know when we study the leaders in each of these communities. But right now, we can't afford to be operating on these old, outdated ideas, or we're going to create a bigger crisis.
Right. One thing, it can all sound completely overwhelming and incredibly pessimistic when we think about all the changes that need to be made and how resistant to adaptation these institutions are. But take a look at something like the Christian or Catholic Church, and take a look at how they've adjusted according to the will of the people over time. I mean, at first in the 1200s, it was the Inquisition, it was the Holy Wars, and then there was the witch hunts, and then there was all of these different absolutely crazy draconian practices that were going on. And then still, fast forward a few hundred years, there's still hellfire and brimstone. You're going to go to hell. If you're gay, you burn in hell immediately. And then see how that's adapted, this institution that's been, one of those forces of
now you if you're gay, you don't go to hell immediately, just when you die.
Yeah, you look, and even the preachers that are out there now, they're not preaching the hellfire and brimstone. Why? Because their congregation doesn't show up anymore.
Yeah,
they don't get people in the seats. They don't get the tithing, and so even an institution like that has adapted. It has adapted over the time. An institution like McDonald's. McDonald's is way healthier now relatively to what it was 20 years ago because people want to have salads. All right, maybe it's not the best source produce and the best this, but if you look at the menu compared now to then, it's better. The chicken source is better. You have more salad options. You have more low carb options. Things will adapt when we demand it, and it's incremental. The more that people start demanding and voting with their dollars,
that's it.
It will change, and leaders will emerge, and people will be like, "No, this leader works," and then all the politicians will be like, "Oh shit, I gotta be more, I gotta think along these lines." Like all of these organizations, corporations, they're not going to lead; they're going to lag.
Yeah,
and so it's really up. The primacy is It's on us. It's
Yeah.
on all of us.
You know, Bioptimizers makes an amazing product called P3OM, which is a prebiotic product. And it's amazing for not only helping repopulate the gut with friendly bacteria, but as Wade will tell you, it's really, really an amazing product in case you ever feel like you're getting any kind of food poisoning or illness coming on. And Wade's right here with me, and he's the co-founder of Bioptimizers, and he knows more about P3OM than anybody. But I can tell you this, I've had nothing but excellent results and nothing but positive feedback from all my clients and friends that I've turned on to P3OM. So Wade, tell us a little bit about P3OM and why it works so well.
Well, P3M is, we call it the Navy SEAL of probiotics.
Amen.
Basically, its job is to kick out the bad guys in your body. Food poisoning is one of those things from bad bacteria. What we've done is we've taken an aggressive strain of L. plantarum. We put it into toxic soup, ran a sine wave to keep a few of them alive. And the few survivors we grow in very specialized medium to make a cultured, patented enzyme that has extraordinary powers. Number one, it survives the intestinal tract.
Yes.
And number two, it absolutely hunts down pathogens in the body, bacteria, viruses, these type of things. And this is really where the future of probiotics is. It is about developing and culturing and creating super strains of probiotic, very much like the Navy SEALs go through a training, and these individuals have extraordinary powers to deal with chaos. And in today's world where we want to improve our immunity and our function and our gut health, P3M is head and shoulders above any probiotic out there.
So my understanding is it can be used daily as a supplement, but it can also be used in larger quantities as a defense measure.
We've tested this literally with over 100 of our friends who have been suffering from various times of food poisoning. And a handful of those guys, when you're in food poisoning, and within 20 to 30 minutes, you complete recovery.
That's awesome. And I've seen it happen myself. Angie has felt bad a number of times, and several of people in the house or family have. And I say, take 10. If that doesn't feel good in an hour, take 20. And you've told me you can't overdose on them, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's the beauty of P3M. You can't take too much. They'll fight off the bad guys, and they'll get your digestion rocking and rolling the way it should.
So if you want to have a healthy gut and you want some defense, carry P3OM with you wherever you go, airplanes, cars, business meetings, hotels, conferences, and you've got your Navy SEALs in the bottle, and they're ready for you anytime. Wade, how do we get a hold of your amazing P3OM product?
Super easy. Just go to www.bioptimizers.com/living4D and put in Paul10 for your 10% discount code. That's BIOPTIMIZERS.com/living4D and Paul10 for your discount code.
You got it. There you go. Try it. You'll love it. I use them. I can't tell you enough how much I love this product. I think it's a genius product, and you've heard it right from the master himself. Get your P3OM. Let us know how you feel about it. Lots of love. Money is the blood of policy and productivity, right? If you don't have enough money, you can't implement a change in strategy because it requires contacting a lot of people, explaining a lot of things to them, and helping them see why we should or shouldn't do things. And I think part of the reason we're in all this trouble is because we've all gotten so busy that we actually rarely ever have a clue what the governments are doing. We really don't. We don't have a clue what big media is doing. We don't have a clue what medicine's doing. We find out when someone's telling you to cut a hole in your wall, and that's how you got to have sex. And all of a sudden we're like, how in the world did you come up with that? But in a democratic government, we should be aware of what the issues are, and we should be aware that we have an opportunity to vote for these things. But like I've seen these, like for the vote, when you get the book, it's like there's 150 things being voted on, and who in the world has the time to actually study each of these candidates and what their beliefs are? And we know that politicians are world famous for telling people what they want to hear and giving them what the politician wants, not what they need. In other words, telling a story. The United States is famous for making promises to countries around the world and then not keeping them. I never forget George Bush made a promise to one of the countries, I can't remember, but I think it was Africa, to give them something like $6 billion for grain and for food. And he made the first payment of $500 million and then never paid anything after that. But he only did it while the cameras were focused on him. And I was reading a book that was about this and how the African government was just waiting and waiting and waiting and just kept getting pushed aside. The point being is we really have to slow the system down, and we've got to slow ourselves down and really get to an awareness of, okay, how do I create space to anchor myself in my own health and vitality? How do I create space to anchor my family? And then how do I create a certain amount of time each day to really get a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the world that I need to participate in? Right now, I don't think people, between self and family, I think the only way they're participating in the world is just fear and shock and pure reactivity. But a group like that you've got going,
Right.
You're Fit for Service, is really saying, okay, let's think about what it means to be fit for service. What does it mean to be fit within yourself? What does it mean to have fit, healthy relationships? What does it mean to have a fit tribe? And then we have to sort of powwow the planet together.
Yeah, and I always think of it as oftentimes people assume that time is the rate limiting factor for what we can accomplish. I really don't think it is. I think it's energy.
Yeah.
And I think really what it is do you have the vitality, or are you just so exhausted and inflamed from the shitty food you're eating and so consumed with the melodramas of your relationships and this thing going on in your family that's eating up your time and the forgiveness that you haven't given and the grievances that you have towards yourself and others? Is that just burning on a constant loop? So then it feels like you don't have any time because you're consuming that much of your energy. Because really we have way more time if we have the energy. If we actually have the energy to do it, we can have that amazing time with our family and go do our work. And then we won't have to collapse in a heap on our bed because we have the vitality to be able to say, okay, now I'm going to spend an hour looking out into the world and seeing how I can contribute, or however much time we have. For a lot of us, it's going to be even more time than that. And it's really just a matter of getting that energy and support in the community to hold you so you can move through your challenges faster. So it takes you a month to get through this trauma rather than, 10 years to get through this trauma.
I think too, when you have more energy, you get more work done per unit of time.
Truth.
Right? It's just like going in the gym. Someone who's really fit can move a lot of pounds of weight in 20 minutes, but someone who's not may not even move a tenth of that in 20 minutes. And they both may have the same level of perceived fatigue, just like, if my deadlift maximum is 500 and someone else is 400, we're both working at the same level, 100% exertion. But if you're fit, you get a lot more done, and you actually, because of that, you have other time to engage other aspects of your life. From what I see, having worked in a clinic for my whole life and worked with all sorts of people from, the typical work world to elite athletics, is that most people, by the time they get home, they're so completely and utterly exhausted that all they want to do is have a glass of wine and stare at something on television and completely and utterly check out. Because they actually don't even enjoy living in the world that they've been born into. So it's as though they don't really start living until they get a couple of drinks under their belt, and now lots of pot and something to completely distract them. And unfortunately, a lot of people keep watching the news hour, which is probably about the worst possible thing you could watch, considering the well-documented falsity of it all. And so I think if people really come to the realization that choosing to live is a necessary choice to choose to love. Because if you're not really alive, you don't have enough energy to share in love, and you're collapsed into yourself, and life is just this big struggle. And I think if more people would return back to the basics, and one of the things that I like about the tribe model is I think that's ultimately where we're headed on a big scale. I think what's got to happen for our own safety and security is we have to localize energy production. So start gridding, networking a community with solar energy so that we're not dependent upon fossil fuel driven energies, and we're not even dependent. So if the next county over gets hit by a tornado, or the power station gets hit by a tornado, actually it debilitates only small areas because we're networked together. Share resources, share water. And I think we have to get out of this easily manipulated cash system, digital system, and start a hybrid that's half bartering. Aubrey is really good at, say, making such and such an item, and I'm a doctor. So I come help you when your kids are sick, and you give me cheese because you've got cows and you've got cheese to barter. Because then what happens is we actually start trading real value for real value. Right now, it's really hard to say what the value of our money is at any given moment. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, of course. I think what occurs to me is the smaller the units of organization and the more autonomy those organizations have, the better off we're going to be. Even states' rights, right? Like if every state could really decide their own laws, really top to bottom, we'd be in way better shape, because then the states that were making sense would then have everybody moving in. And we saw that with marijuana laws, right? Like as soon as they released the prohibition of marijuana laws in Colorado started booming. People started moving to Colorado. And so in these places, if the states had even more autonomy, decide where a higher portion of the tax dollars went straight to that state, a higher portion of their ability to create laws and policies regarding masks and vaccinations, where a state could be like, you know what, no mandatory vaccinations for kids in this state. We have these offered. If anybody wants them, of course you can get them. It's all elective. It's your choice. You have the right to put this into your kid's body or not, and that state would develop. And then fucking so many people, it wouldn't matter what state it was. It could be Iowa, and people are like, damn, I don't really love Iowa's natural landscape, but Iowa has some pretty dope policies as it concerns this, this, and this. And then Iowa would start to thrive and cultivate this community. But even on a smaller scale, even within the state, within a county or a city, like the more autonomy we can give to the smaller units, then we allow people the freedom to choose.
Yes. And it also really supports diversity, because if you have state government that can control what the federal government's controlling, we might have this state has legalized psilocybin, marijuana, and you can have your own ceremonies there. You can set up a system where you can be a trained facilitator of healing, plant healing ceremonies. You can have vaccination freedom. You do or you don't. It's up to you. So what happens is it gives us a chance to actually do social research where we say, well, what happens if you give people access to psychedelics and they don't have to vaccinate their children? Then we go to these other states where they're living under the kind of circumstances we're under right now. And we say, well, how healthy are the kids? How intelligent are the people becoming? What's the diversity there? What's their gross national product? And it's probably only going to take a couple of years before the obviousness of that is like, wow, that state over there isn't doing very well. And they're spending a hell of a lot of money on vaccinations and biotech and all this other crap. But this state over here that's living more like Californians lived in the 60s, closer to the earth, with ceremonies of medicine and good music and bartering and taking care of each other, is going to probably shoot through the roof. And it would be literally like a social experiment that could be easily studied and objectified, just the way anthropologists study cultures and cultural anthropology.
And that's absolutely what happens. And again, going back to that same example with marijuana, before they legalized recreational marijuana, everybody's like, oh man, people are going to be driving all high and there's going to be so many car accidents, and then nobody's going to go to work. All of these biases and all of these propagandized opinions. And then you start looking at the data. Oh, all of traffic accidents are down because people aren't being as drunk.
They're not as aggressive.
They're driving slower than the speed limit because they're high, not racing around all, with their GABA agonist alcohol, just lowering inhibitions in that way. So all of these different things that people were saying and projecting are now like, oh, well, I guess that was wrong.
Yes.
And now here's the actual data. And that's, we really need that. But if the government puts that kind of authoritarian control, then it's really hard to have these, test samples. It's really hard to have these observational studies on a state or county-wide basis.
The other thing is, I think as well as I do, when you tell people what they can't have and can't do, doesn't stop them from doing it. It just means they take it under the table, right? The war on drugs produces the biggest flow of drugs on the planet, like cartels. So they say, oh, you want a war on drugs? We'll give you one. We'll take over your entire frickin' country. We'll kill your police department and do exactly what we want. So I think, when you actually realize that when we stop people from having access to the things that inherently help us be human, be it plant medicines or freedom of speech, it just pushes it underground, and then it just comes out in another form somehow, but it then becomes accessible to less people because it becomes illegal, but you also don't have as many people with great minds contributing because it's hidden, right? It becomes occult. Imagine if you took all the occult sciences and put them on the table at every university around the world and say, okay, let's discuss this. Let's analyze it from what we know today, see where maybe we can make it better, but also see maybe where the occultists had a lot of great concepts that we should learn from, and we analyzed it with respect for what it is and what it was, but what we could make it today. In other words, if you took what was hidden and brought it up for everybody to participate in with the spirit of democracy, I think we could turn all sorts of stuff that's very misconceived. I mean, I've got Mayor Giuliano, who's the mayor of New York's report on marijuana that he did because the federal government tried to shut him down when he was mayor. And he said, I see nothing but positive effects from the trade of marijuana. So he did an investigation, which is about a 400-page book. And he showed that in every university he sent his investigators into, the people smoking pot consistently had the highest grades, and the people drinking alcohol regularly had the lowest grades. He showed many of the health benefits of marijuana, but he's basically was saying to the federal government, I'm not going to do this just because you want me to. And even after they produced the report, they told him, you either stop letting marijuana be traded or we remove you. So he had to pretty much lay down, but he produced a hell of a good report. So there you see someone who says, no, I'm not just going to follow the rules. I'm going to investigate this and put the information on the table, because we can't make intelligent decisions as a democracy unless we have enough information on the table that's there for everybody to see, which means we have to have a vehicle of exposing people to what are the issues that we need to look into, like a massive web system that isn't controlled by corporations or special interest groups. It can run commercials and ads and distract you. It has to be something that basically we need a panel of wise men and women, like the grandfathers and grandmothers of a tribe, to say these are the issues that we all need to look at, and these have been presented in an unbiased way, kind of like you're supposed to do in a legal case. So then we can sift through all the information and make decisions. Or I think we're just going to keep getting, we're perpetually going to be fighting the power and the manipulation of just a handful of giant dragons that are like Bill Gates, that can manipulate anybody to get whatever they want. And that's going to lead to a bigger crisis than we're in.
Yeah, it's, and I think it will develop in time, you know, and I think like, even you look at something like, I mean, Google has such a monopoly. I mean, just such a massive monopoly in the way that if you look at the Creepy Line and look at some of these documentaries that show how things are filtered to actually change your perception, and how people with their own biases and their own political agendas and their own, you know, ad revenue and their own other factors can actually manipulate the system to create a result or create election results, or there's a lot of different things that are happening right now. But as soon as people become aware, and they're like, oh, fuck it, I'm going to search on Bing now. Yeah. And like Bing stands up and says, I don't even know if that's even a search engine anymore, but I'm just coming up with an obscure one. But someone comes out and they raise some money and they say, look, enough people are sick of this. We're going to have an absolutely unbiased neutral search engine with neutral criteria and an algorithm. That's it. Need. And then everybody's just like, fuck it. All right. You know, this is the rally. We all got to search on Bing from now on because this is bullshit. Oh, YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, they're all censoring content. Okay, this new platform is developed and there's no censorship on this platform. Just like a lot of these other messaging platforms where, you know, like I think it's Telegraph and some other different messaging platforms that are encrypted so that all of your data is not, you can't text your friend about wanting to go to Tulum and then you see, you know, an ad for Tulum pop up, you know, on your thing. Like everything is being watched right now. but other services will come and people will just choose those services. So it will correct itself. But the first thing that needs to happen is people need to have that awareness. People need to become aware of actually what's happening, and then the market will demand and the market will respond to those demands.
You know, glutathione is an extremely powerful antioxidant. I don't know if any of you have ever noticed on my YouTube videos from a couple of years ago, I had a spot forming just below my left eye, which was the result of me doing so much research on herbs. And Angie, who is a nutritionist, said, you should try some glutathione. Maybe you need more antioxidant support. And literally day by day, I watched it disappear as soon as I started taking glutathione. But I didn't have the kind of glutathione that Symbiotica produces in their new Regenesis product. So I've got Sherveen here to really explain what is unique about their new glutathione product. Sherveen, what can we expect from Regenesis?
Well, that's an interesting story, Paul, regarding that spot. And it just shows you exactly how strong glutathione is. We went out of our way. It took us about 18 months to develop this, a lot of hard work. The entire team of scientists got together. And what we found was that most glutathiones on the open market oxidize because of the sulfur compound that's attached to it. As soon as oxygen hits it, you get this sulfur, layout, which is very, very unpleasant. Our glutathione, which is liposomal, so it is protected, is bounded to lactoferrin. Lactoferrin is the amino acid chain that makes colostrum. So this is our first non-vegan formula. It's still vegetarian, but it isn't vegan. Along with that, we have CoQ10, PQQ, which is pyroquinolone, which is a good brain nootropic, and Lactobacillus rhamnosus, a human strain probiotic. All of these come together. It supports healthy intestinal tract, mitigates food and environmental allergies, improves nerve growth factor, reinforces the immune system, neutralizes free radicals, antiviral, antibacterial, removes heavy metals, and just boosts the brain-gut relationship, which we know now is so critical to longevity and optimum health. This is truly one of our favorite formulas.
Also, unlike a lot of supplements, it tastes very, very good. I was super impressed when I tried it.
Yeah, we find that to be very important. And again, we don't use anything artificial. Everything is organic. They're all extracts, and there's zero sugar in any of our products.
Awesome. So head on over to cymbiotika.com. That's symbiotica.com. And on checkout, use your code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 15 to get your 15% discount on Regenesis and any of the other amazing products at Symbiotica. Enjoy. And if you have spots on your skin, you might just get rid of them with this amazing product. I think we have enough intelligence and enough money in the public to create the equivalent of Google that isn't manipulating people, that's doing what it should do, that's honest. I think we have enough intelligence and money amongst the people to say, wait a minute, this so-called government thing's out of hand. We have to figure out how to create our own government. And when enough people say we're up for that, where we really do have a democratic government, then the other government simply is going to be put out of business because it's made of the same people that we're drawing from. In other words, you can't have a military unless there's someone there holding weapons. But if they realize the cause they're holding the weapon for is unjust, a lot of people will put the weapon down. And I think we're at the point where we have to come to the realization of what isn't just, what isn't moral, and what isn't good for the collective. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to continue to see the faces of division, the effects of division, because the whole COVID thing's brought us into the most segregated, divided situation where the only thing we have in common is that we're really irritated by it.
Yeah, right.
We're all just irritated by it. What are some of the values that you built your program on?
Yeah, I think the core value is that you lead with your vulnerable truth, and vulnerability is an interesting thing because it's twofold. It's not just leading with your, story about the trauma you had, and that's a part of it, and anything that's, difficult for you, but it's also the stuff that you're ashamed of, the stuff that you're embarrassed about, but it's also the stuff that you're really awesome at, that you might have this, false sense, this necessity for humility that'll prevent you from saying, actually I'm really good at this and I can offer this. So vulnerability is really a deep commitment to the truth. It's not putting on any facades. It's not hiding behind anything. And that's overwhelmingly the core value. It's just lead with your vulnerability, lead with the truth. You don't need to overspin the cue ball one way to make yourself seem cool, or underspin it another way to pretend that, you don't have these aggressive urges, or you haven't done these things, and you're like, share the truth. And ultimately when people do that, it gives permission for everybody else to do that. And that's how you really feel seen. Because if we're just showing people the projection of what we want them to see, it's like everybody's watching a movie, the little dramaturgy of our life that we're projecting, rather than seeing the real person. So there's no community there at all, period. Because all we're doing is watching each other's movies. We might be in just a massive hall of mirrors, a projection hall.
Yeah, we're back in Plato's cave.
Exactly. So nothing is real, but to get to the realness and the real truth behind it, whatever that is, and then have that be received, and then share your own truth, that is overwhelmingly the core value, and perhaps the only real core value. And of course, there's some other ones, like, if you're going to do this, like for us as coaches, if we're asking for vulnerability, like we always go first. Like that's my motto all the time. Yeah, it's
critical.
I go first. If I'm asking you guys to do this, I go first. And recently we had a challenge where someone was supposed to share the thing they are most ashamed of, most ashamed of about themselves or about what they've done. And then also the thing that they're the most shy to share, that they really believe that they're the greatest at, that they're the best attribute of themselves. And so it was both. It was sharing the duality. But if us as coaches, and myself included, if we're asking that, we all went through and say, okay, we go first. And that's the motto. And I think that really sets the tone. So it's not like, you guys do this and we'll judge you from another place. It's like, no. Like we're gonna come in here and we're gonna show you from our own hearts.
Otherwise, it's like showing up at a nude beach all dressed,
right?
And sitting there staring at everybody.
Right. Right.
Like, all right, this guy's.
That's a great analogy.
He's here for different reasons than we are.
It's a great analogy.
Funny, he's sitting along the shore looking up, not at the top.
Yeah, exactly. Not even looking at the water.
Yeah. He must be a government official doing a head count. See who can fit through the glory hole. Yeah, it's a crazy thing. Well, that's really good. So, sort of to spend the rest of the podcast, I've got a theme that I got from my studies at Ken Wilber, who I study a lot and really honor and respect as a great mind, right? Ken Wilber's work. I'm assuming he's pretty deep. And, Ken Wilber says we're at a point now where we need to wake up, clean up, grow up, and show up. So in the context of both your fit for service, but also in the context of fit for service as a world populace right now, in order to really create something that's beautiful, that's sustainable, that enhances life, both in nature and in our lives, and gives us a place where our kids have a future of doing something other than wearing hazmat masks everywhere and having to be educated on iPhones and have no social skills whatsoever. What's your feeling with regard to what it means to wake up right now?
Well, I think it's something that is used a lot, and I think it's used in kind of a negative way. It's used as kind of a contrasting slight to other people who are asleep, because the process of waking up is not binary. It's a gradual waking up. Like, I've been continually waking up my whole life, and I'm continuing to wake up currently. So to say like wake up as a definition, it's not. It's like enlightened or not enlightened. It's not really that way. There's an enlightening that happens. There's a waking that happens. And what that is it's becoming more aware of your subconscious. It's shining the light into your subconscious, where all of the conditioning lies, where all of your urges and motivations may be coming from. Like, why are you attracted to these type of people? Is it a trauma bonding pattern? Is it some kind of redemption from your childhood? Waking up in relationship is realizing, oh, wait, am I trying to duplicate something from my childhood to redeem some slight and some trauma that I've internalized. Let me become aware of that. And once I'm aware of that, then I can actually have agency and operate with it. Waking up in the world is saying, oh, daddy government doesn't always have my best interest in mind.
That's the kind of waking up I'm referring to.
It's all, so you have to become aware of all of this and wake up to yourself. Like, what are my own biases? What's my own desire for comfort? What's my fear of actually going for it and identifying myself as a hero and recognizing how much power I have? Am I afraid that if I recognize how much power I have and then I fail, that I'll let people down, and then my own self-criticism will get to such a degree that I won't be able to handle it? And is that keeping me stationary and in the same spot? It's really all about awareness. Waking up is just, how much can I be aware of in myself and in the collective? And it's a constant thing. You're just pushing a little bit farther, a little bit farther, a little bit farther, and gradually waking up more and more until we're as awake as we can possibly be. But we're enshrouded in Maya, the illusion. We're enshrouded in dreamscape. So the idea of being completely awake, except for maybe brief moments of pure Satori or some plant medicine guided, it's a goal. It's something that we can set our sights on, but it's not something that I think is attained in a yes, no, 1 or 0 way. It's a gradual process, and we should all set our sights on waking up as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, I think for me it means wake up to the responsibility you have with how you spend your money. Wake up to whether or not what you're doing is sustainable on a grand scale. Wake up to whether or not you're contributing beyond just your personal interests. Wake up to the genius that's within you. We all have, just as we all have a hero in us, we all have a genius in us. Our soul is the genie and the genius that, so when I'm talking about the issues of COVID on many podcasts, I say, look, whatever you love to do, do it. If you love to paint some truth. If you love to teach some truth. If you love to sing, create inspirational songs that, be like a Gordon Lightfoot or a Bob Dylan or any of these great folk singers that got us through Vietnam and many of the other crises such as World War. If you love to write. In other words, I think that waking up is waking up to your natural means of contributing, but also waking up to something greater than just your personal needs, but to the collective needs of the family, the culture, and the world. And so I don't think waking up can really happen without education, because how do you wake up without education?
Well, I mean, there's certainly people who've woken up to a lot of things without education, because education is a lot of conditioning, but it's education from the world. And I think what you're talking about is lowercase e education rather than capital E education.
I don't necessarily mean, I mean listening to podcasts like this, where you're getting your mind expanded instead of just getting another bunch of political stuff regurgitated. I mean, waking up to the fact that your walls are 6 inches thick and glory holes don't really work.
And if they do, good for you.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
High five.
And we know you're a porn star. But, I think, if I look at the times in my life where I had the most rapid awakenings, it's when I was in the most pain, because I really was inspired to say, okay, if I did this to myself, I got to make sure I don't do it again. So what did I do? B, if I'm trying to get advice or education about what to do and I'm following it and it's not working, then I have to figure out other ways. I've got to be creative. I've got to go, as I said in our podcast, find someone that's been through this and ask them, how did you overcome this? And so there's an awakening opportunity. And, the first thing the hero does is he goes on his departure, but has to find a mentor to make it through the ordeal, right? So I think part of waking up is listening carefully, whether it be to Ken Wilber or Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra or you or me or, all of us and anybody else that really sets off your truth buzzer and makes you have that sense of, there's some logic here. There's some rationale here. If I apply as much of that as I can, my life is likely to be better. But I think the first step of waking up is awareness. So I think we really have to be aware of what is it that we need to wake up to. I'm just curious if you had to encapsulate with regard to what we're going through collectively right now, what is it that we need to be aware of to begin our process of waking up what would you say it is?
Well, I can talk about my own journey because I've always subscribed to Hanlon's razor, which is do not ascribe malice to something that can be explained by ignorance or ineptitude, right? So that's philosopher Hanlon who came up with that, guidepost. And so I was thinking, look, people are just scared. People are just overreacting. Nobody's confronted their own fear of death. And so this potential threat of death from this virus is just making everybody go crazy and everybody's doing their best. And that was really kind of the way I started believing what was happening. And I still think there's a lot of that exists. But as I've gone deeper, I was waking up to what I perceived to be actual malice, like intentional manipulation for personal gain. And that was a waking up process. Like, damn, it seems like there's a political agenda behind this. It seems like there's a pharmaceutically driven corporate agenda behind this, where there's a massive $50 billion, $100 billion vaccine payout at the end of this game. And they're willing to put the world through hell so they can collect this paycheck. And while I can't be 100% certain of that, I've become aware of the distinct possibility that there's malicious forces at play beyond just simple ignorance. Now, I think everybody always justifies and deludes themselves into believing that they're doing something for the greater good. It's a trick of the human mind. However, when you really look at it, I think there's intentional manipulation and intentional evil.
Well, I don't know what great philosopher said this, but someone wise said, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Yeah.
So if it looks like we're being manipulated, and it looks like we're having people trying to force drugs and vaccinations onto us, and it looks like we're being told things that aren't even common sense from a health perspective, an immune perspective, and if we're getting information about viruses that's very, very outdated and untrue, I'd say we got a duck in the room.
And I think one of the things, so why was I resistant to waking up in that way? Well, I don't necessarily want to be called to the front. It's not like I don't want to be called to the front lines. In some part of me does. Some part of me knows that that's what I was born for, is a real call to service. But some part of me would like to say, look, this will blow over. Just focus on your thing, contribute, write your books, run your fit for service program, do your podcast. It's all good.
What's more frontline than that, though?
Well, that is exactly how I will stand on the front line, is through those things. But to actually have to go into, COVID and manipulation and policy, and then put myself out in the forefront where I have arrows from both sides, because I'm always going to be on the middle ground, and really stand in that stronger way, I think there was an inherent resistance. So basically what I'm saying is I wanted to believe Hanlon's razor. I wanted to believe it's all good. People are just doing their best. But now as I uncover more malice, then it calls me forward to a greater degree. And there was an inherent resistance. And where I'm looking at it, I'm going, oh no, not only because of how bad it is for the world, but also because what my own hero nature is saying, which is, oh no, I got to do more now. I gotta come forward even stronger. I got to step up with more authority.
Yeah. And it starts getting more uncomfortable, right? So this situation, as you were talking, I had a visual come to me. Imagine that you have a house and you sleep on the second floor in a loft, and you can see down into your living room and your front door. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, someone walks in the door and you go, oh, somebody's in the wrong house. You think, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they'll figure it out in a minute. Then they walk over to your desk and they start folding up your computer and stuffing it in their bag. And you go, wow, this guy really needs a computer. Maybe he's going to try to call Uber with it. The next thing you know, you see him tapping the walls and they find you're safe and he pulls out some electrical gadget and takes all the money out of the wall. And you go, wow, maybe this guy's really broke. At some point you're going to have to say, all right, I'm being fucking robbed. And I wonder what he's going to do when he sees me. In other words, maybe he's got a gun in his little bag too, and he's not afraid to use it. So we're all like, I think most of us don't want to engage the criminal, right?
Right.
We want to just say, okay, this is just a bummer and this is going to clear up and it's going to get better. But, in that analogy, where are we? I'd like to hear from both of you. Ryan, where are we? What's the guy got his hands on in your house right now? Well, when he's already got him on our nuts, we talked about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's in the living room right now.
He's fucking
in the living room. He's fucking with our kids.
He's in the bedroom.
Yeah, he's in the bedroom. He's in the living room. He's fucking with our kids.
He's in
fucking
the safe.
with our life. He's in the safe for sure.
Okay, so at what point do we say enough's a fucking enough and it's time to be a spiritual warrior and say, look, we're going to try to do this politely. You can either put everything you just took back and leave, or we have to do it a different way. And the first thing I would do is bind a person like that. That's what Kung Fu was developed. It's a defensive art to protect loving people against unloving people. And so I would say, okay, I have to bind you. And the problem is we don't know who to call anymore because the cops aren't very wise either.
And the only thing that can bind them is everybody holding hands together.
That's it.
And that's the only binding.
I love that. That's what we all got to do. We have to circle the globe and hold hands.
I forget who said the quote. Ryan, you can maybe look it up, but it was, we shouldn't fear our governments should fear us.
And that's what we got to get together.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily need the governments to fear us. They need to respect us, right?
Uh-huh.
Respect.
And they won't respect anything unless they're afraid
And they
of
won't
losing
respect
that.
anything unless it affects their bottom line.
Exactly.
Because we don't have a government anymore. We have a corporate headquarters. So it's all about a few people getting very rich. I'll give you a true story about exactly how this shit goes down. Because what's happening right now is we're moving towards a crossbreed between communism and fascism. When I was lecturing in Russia, one of my best buddies was Maxim. He was on the Russian Olympic team, and I think he set a world record in the clean and jerk. And he invited me down to train with the Russian Olympic team. So he picked me up and I got to go train with the Russian Olympic team. Now, these are the best weightlifters in the frickin' world, right? Right up there with, the best of the best. Anyone that's watched the Olympics knows who the Russian Olympic athletes are. They're always badass. Okay, so I drive up to this place, I pull in. Now, on the outside, it looks quite nice. It's like a good state-sponsored building, clean and orderly. I walk inside, and the wooden floor's got big holes in it. You can't find two matching weight plates. The bars are bent. The equipment's broken down. I'm like, what the fuck? This is where the best athletes in Russia train. They got like a collection of junk in their gym. And then I want to have a shower because we're going to go from there to lunch. I go in, there's no shower heads. There's no toilet seats. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. There's no paper towels. There's no toilet paper.
Wow.
And I said to my buddy Maxim, I said, what in the fuck is going on? I said, is this your Olympic training center? He said, yes. Due to the communist regime, what happens is they allot several $1 million a year for athletic development, and each of the higher-ups takes what he wants out of it. And by the time it gets to the athletes and the coaches, there's nothing left. Sound familiar, right?
It's called our tax dollars.
By the time it gets to us, there's nothing left. And what are we hearing whispers of? Oh, we're going to put you on a monthly stipend and all this kind of shit. It's time for us to circle the globe, hold hands, and say, look, this is how we choose to live, and this is what we're willing to do to create it. And the truth of the matter is, if enough of us get together, we don't need government approval. We don't need government handouts because we can support each other. And that's real government.
One of the really challenging parts of this is that people are so myopically focused on what it's like a great illusionist. The media is keeping us focused on this one ball and then just not talking about any of the other effects.
That's exactly
not
my
talking
point.
about the rise in drug use, not talking about the rise of solicitation, suicides, not talking
domestic violence.
Domestic violence is way up, exponentially up. Solicitation of child sex acts online is like doubled during this COVID, like so many different factors. Then you look at like global hunger issues, right? Like the famine that's being spread across the world and the estimates from like the World Food Program about how many people are going to be pushed to starvation because of the cessation of trade and the inability to operate, which is already a massive problem anyways, a problem that we could fix with a fraction of our bailout dollars.
Yes.
Just a fraction of that. But nobody's looking at this holistic, nuanced conversation. Everybody's like, death count, death count, death count. Okay, what about the millions of people dying of hunger that we could have saved with a fraction of this money? The millions of people dying of unsanitary water, children with their stomachs bloated because we will not provide sanitation for the world that we could do with 12% of what we've spent just on bailing out for this COVID thing. But we're not looking at any of this from a holistic perspective at all.
The other thing too is not to belabor the sex and the hole in the wall, but they're not only asking us now, at least the Canadian government, to have sex through a hole in the wall, they're actually creating an environment where we're only seeing each other through a tiny hole, which is the lens of a camera. Think of your iPhone. It's like a window into the world, but it's not the actual world. Just like television, movies are not real. They're acting, right?
Right.
So we are actually being segregated to the point now where everything's happening through some kind of a hole, but only they can seem to be the ones that can manipulate the kaleidoscope. Mm-hmm. They're controlling the images. I think at some point we have to say, okay, who is it that we can really trust for medical advice? I.e., do we really need to wear a mask? And is this virus a legitimate threat or is this propaganda? And when we get some credible people that we can say, we trust our credible people more than we trust your credible people. Therefore, they are now our chiefs and they are our politicians. And we're going to listen to our credible leaders because they have a better track record of yours, not only as being good doctors, but not lying and manipulating and cheating and stealing from us. Then we have to hold hands and say, okay, no more living through a hole. Let's live. And like anything, just like when Gandhi encouraged all of the people of India to be nonviolent and not to, even if you get beat up by the British military, don't fight back. And eventually they're going to realize they can't win this thing, and it's going to make them look really bad if they beat people up that are not fighting, which is exactly what happened. And, I've seen a lot of documentaries showing a lot of the Indian people get the hell beat out of them with, because the British military and cops were, taking over the public and fighting all this. But ultimately, nonviolence won. Mm-hmm. So I think part of our spiritual warrior path that we're all on is we have to be brave enough to do our very best to do these types of transitions without violence and just by working collectively, just like small fish swim in schools to create the illusion of a big fish. We have to get aligned in our values and hold hands together and become a big enough fish that the big fish realizes that it's not going to be quite so easy to just keep people trapped in their bedrooms and imposing really unhealthy concepts on us. The next stage is cleanup. What's your sort of feeling of what we really need to clean up? So, we've talked about a bunch of it, but if under the heading cleanup, if you're running your group and you're teaching people to clean up to be fit for service, what is the cleanup element of it? I know the shadow would be for sure part of it. The diet must be part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a metaphor for many aspects of being a human, but I think really the cleanup has to start with ourselves. We have to scrub our own psyche, our own spirit, our own body. The Fit for Service program really is cleanup because, what is clogging the works? What is the muddiness? It's all of the stuff that we have inside. It's the trauma that we're carrying. It's the toxins that we have in our body. It's the, mental programs and patterns, the need to do more for validation so that we love ourselves. Well, we got to clean that up so we love ourselves. So we don't need to go, get that validation from another, source outside of ourselves, that we're actually sustainable as a unit of one, to be able to be like our own healthy ecosystem. And so I think really cleanup for me is let's clean ourselves up. And then that's what's going to ultimately clean up this massive machine that's a society is when we're cleaned up, then we'll be ready to hold everybody else's hand who's also in the process of cleaning up. Yeah. And again, it's not binary. We're not going to be perfectly clean, but part of the cleaning is the forgiveness for all of our dirty spots. Like that's the key aspect, is to say, oh, I understand this. I have this greed. One of the great sayings is "Tatwa masi," which is "I am that too." So anything we look out at the world, we say, "Oh, I am that too." So all of this suppression and all of this manipulation, if we look at our own language to ourselves and some of the things that we do to ourselves and in our relationships, or maybe even to our children, we'll find depression there. We'll find misleading. We'll find, having them look at one ball while we remove something else. Like, hey, why don't you go play outside? And meanwhile, we remove their Nintendo from their room or whatever. Any example.
That's pretty good for a guy that doesn't have any kids. Maybe the future's talking.
But that's we'll find it. We'll find in ourselves everything that we see out there. And if we can clean it up in ourselves, that's, I think, the most important place to start the cleaning. And I think everything will start to clean up externally.
I think too, part of the cleanup is being more balanced in our intake of information. If you're only listening to people that are in line with your belief system or your bias, then you're not really cleaning up, because you're not really growing your awareness, right? So I think part of the cleanup really is about, like I said earlier, let's get a worldwide panel of experts with a variety of opinions on any of the issues with COVID or on government or on education or on banking. And I think cleaning up is being brave enough to hear opinions that contradict your own, but also being brave enough to actually listen and say, what would it be like to actually, did you ever do debates when you were in school and you had to switch sides, right? So you really had to do your best to imbibe yourself into the role of the opposition after you'd been on the other side. Now, some people have a hard time doing that. I find it quite fun. But I think we really have to be able to, okay, as hard as it is for me to truly listen to someone like Bill Gates, I got to say, okay, what is it like to really see the world through his eyes? What is he really trying to do? What is the love in him projecting onto the world with the grandest of intentions? And then I have to say, okay, now how does Zach Bush use his love to project into the world what he thinks is very important? So there I just created sort of the two opposite ends of a dialectic. So I think if we actually look with honesty at what's on the playing field, and instead of being stuck in a bias or thinking about what's going to give me the most amount of money or the least hassle, say what's going to be the best for all. And I think that really is a step toward learning to use our minds effectively. And to use your mind effectively, you have to honor and respect other people's ideas and values, or if you don't honor their ideas and values, you're not going to even be interested in listening to someone. And if you don't listen to someone, they never feel heard. And if they don't feel heard, they just keep on talking and turning the volume up until they finally get heard. Most people will.
Yeah. And we also have to be mindful of just as we're mindful of the pollution we put in our body.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
amount of glyphosate that comes in on the vegetables, right? Where a piece of lettuce may not be healthy at all if it's conventionally grown, and it's actually doing way more harm than it is good. We have to understand that a lot of the news that we're watching, a lot of the social media that we're consuming, if we're not actually curating who we follow and how we look, it's pollution.
It's contrived. It's propaganda.
It is. And so we have to be mindful of the pollution we put in, but also open-minded to not say, oh, this is pollution. This is nonsense. This is conspiracy. This is blah, blah, blah. Be aware of it and then be fair and be skeptical, but cut out all of the nonsense, because we're not immune to programming. We're not immune to conditioning.
And do the work to follow up the resources. Like if they claim it's a scientific study, well, who funded it and who is involved in it, right? I spent my life investigating these kinds of things because there was so much misinformation in the whole exercise and health arena, and which I, lived and functioned in for most of my life, that I said, well, I can't really believe a study like that until I investigate what the underlying principles were, how the study was designed, who funded it. inevitably you see the people that funded it are the ones making the biggest gains from people believing in that, you know? It's kind of like McDonald's backing the Olympics. It's like, are you kidding me? Come on. Growing up, we've talked about the rite of passage. I really feel that if you look at humanity as a being and each human as a cell in that organism, does that make sense?
Yep.
That we're really right now in the late stages of puberty, and we're really having to decide if we're ready to accept adulthood. And so I think the growing up of it is really becoming an adult means, to me, an adult is someone who says what they mean and means what they say, right? If I shake hands with you and say, okay, I'm going to meet you here at 11, and I don't hear back from you, I'll be here at 11, unless I call you and say I'm 5 minutes late.
Which is what an adult does.
Right.
They're not perfect, but they follow up with their best intentions.
Right, because an adult usually is someone that has responsibilities that have ramifications if you don't fulfill those responsibilities. I have a responsibility to my family to feed them and clothe them and support them, and to my institute and to everybody. But I think right now we've got to grow up, and I think growing up really means preparing yourself for the necessary sacrifices that are going to happen so that we can make this transition collectively. And it might mean not using Google as a search engine so that we're not exposing ourselves to or supporting that manipulation. I know many people I know have stopped using Facebook because of all the crap going on with Facebook. So some of these things may not be so big, but they may actually make things so that you don't get quite as much instant gratification, or right. For example, recycling. That takes a little bit of effort, right? I compost. So I put all my compost in a compost barrel, I rotate it, I mature it, and then we spread it on the plants. Now that takes time quite regularly to go out and compost stuff, mix it, put it in the garden. And I could easily just say to myself, I don't have time for this shit, and throw stuff in the trash. So I think part of growing up is getting clear on not only what we all need to think about sacrificing, but what we're willing to sacrifice. And as we get comfortable with that, then maybe we can add a little bit more and a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest part of adulthood. It's accepting that you are part of a tribe, a global tribe, and your individual tribe. And I think when you're a kid, you don't have those responsibilities. Like a kid is always shrugging responsibilities.
Right.
And nobody places responsibility. Just be a kid.
Yeah.
Be a fucking kid. Play, explore, do whatever. But when you're an adult, then you assume the mantle of responsibility. And that's the place that we're in now, where it's time to assume the mantle of responsibility for our own health, responsibility for the leaders we have, responsibility for the corporations that we're paying, responsibility for the environment that we're either supporting or destroying. It's about just saying, it is my fault. All of it. I will take my share of the blame. I will not push this off on somebody else. There is more work I can do.
Yeah.
And I'll do that work, and I'll continue doing that work for as long as I live.
So the final stop on the tour for our ceremony today is showing up. And I think showing up is fairly clear in the words. Show up and be congruent with yourself. Show up and accept the responsibilities that rightfully are or should be yours. If people wait around to be told what to do, that's not adult. But recognizing, okay, there's something that I can do with my genius to contribute here, right? I think that showing up is really just being conscious that if everybody in the world was to emulate what you're doing right now, it would make the world a better place. I think that is really showing up.
Yeah, and it's really stepping forward, and I think so many of us. And as I said, there's certain aspects that I've kind of sheltered my innermost thoughts just because I didn't have the courage to enter the fray and say exactly what I thought, or maybe I didn't have the time or initiative to do the research that was necessary to really back what my hunch was about what was going on. But I think all of us are being asked to step forward. And if that means we take the arrows of slights and unfollows and, slanders and all the way to being canceled, for our opinions, whatever the consequence comes, if we believe in it enough, we step forward and we say, here I am, and I'm willing to take whatever consequences come from my truth. And that's my commitment to, and that's my love, that's my genius, that's how I'm showing up for the world, is the willingness to have the tomatoes and the rocks and the arrows slung at me.
Yeah, I'm personally used to it, but I think that there's so many opportunities for each of us to wake up, clean up, grow up, and show up, even just without the issues of the world right now. Right? It's just because we've become too pacified, we've become too entertained, we've become too drugged, we've become too restless and anxious and nervous. We've gotten so far from what nature intended us to be, in my observation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the book, The Human Zoo by Desmond Morris, he does extensive research on what happens to animals when taken out of captivity and put into zoos. And he takes that information and he correlates it with the kinds of problems that people have when they live in cities. And he shows that almost identical things happen to people living in cities in close quarters with too many people that happens to animals when they're put into the zoo. So I think part of what we need to do is really just work on what is it that I need to do to live and love more fully so that I actually feel centered inside of myself enough to trust my own evaluation of my relationships in the world, as opposed to being sort of caught in a hall of mirrors, as you recently said, where my biases are just being mirrored back to me and everything seems to confirm my bias. And I think that's also something that's not easy for people to do, because most of those biases have been put into them before they were conscious that they were being put in there. In other words, they recapitulate the bias of the parents and the bias of the family and the bias of the religion that's involved. So I think it's something like Fit for Service is really a good vehicle, because if you're with other people that are also doing it, it's kind of like a lot of people like to work out with other people because it inspires them. Not that many people are lone rangers. I happen to be a lone ranger that way. But I think that I love the fact that you want your model to be copied and used so that we have this sort of self-inspired awakening, self-inspired rising, self-inspired impetus to go explore outside of just the limitations of the cages that a lot of people have allowed to be built around them.
Yeah. Yeah. This is and this is another thing that we talked about with excitement in our voices, that this is the best time to be alive.
It is.
This is the best time because we want to be heroes. We're built to be warriors, spiritual warriors. We're built to be heroes, even in our passive, nonviolent standing for what we believe in. We're at the precipice of a revolution, and it's not one that is, like you said, like a world war. That's a different type of stand, and that will call forward the hero. But man, we're not getting gassed in the trenches, and we don't have the horrors of the Vietnam War and all of these different things that people had to go through.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to come together for collective awakening, sharing love the whole way through, and standing in resistance as we want. I had a beautiful example. I talked to somebody a week ago, new friend named Everett, and he was saying, yeah, I just got back from this festival. It was amazing. I was like, festival? The fuck are you talking about? Who's allowing a festival? He's like, check it out. We registered it as a peaceful protest. And so we were able to gather in as many numbers as we wanted. We had music, because they have music at the protest.
Yeah.
We had music, we had speakers, and we just had our festival. No masks, no anything.
I love it.
We registered it as a peaceful protest.
Let's do it.
And in effect, it was a peaceful protest.
Yeah.
It was protesting the authoritarianism of this policy and saying human connection is more important than this scramble and this manipulated fear of death. Like, we're standing for life.
I think
that
it's
was
genius.
a protest. And so that's starting to develop. and we're using the system in the way that it can. Well, okay, there's a peaceful protest allowance, and that's been very politicized as well, but that's part of the structure we have. So let's use the structure in every way we can and make the stand that makes the most sense to our hearts.
Yes, love it. Where can people find out more about Fit for Service and anything else you'd like to share?
AubreyMarcus.com/fit-for-service. Again, there's, I know a lot of people are going to be excited, and I wish I could let everybody in, but it's, it is fairly full, but there are applications that we're taking, and reviewing the applications. We'll absolutely get back to you and let you know. So AubreyMarcus.com, Fit for Service, and my podcast, of course, Aubrey Marcus Podcast.
Yes. Are there any places where there's sharing on website or something, so that even if people don't get in, they want to pick up the vibe and maybe get inspired to start their own group or reach out as friends to people in the group?
So one thing that we're developing now for exactly that need, and I haven't talked about this yet, is we're developing an app that's available on Google, Android, and iPhone.
Great.
It's going to be the Fit for Service Academy that has no cap, and it's just going to be a monthly, and all of us coaches, all the members are going to get together, discussion groups, news feeds, opportunities to learn, courses, and we're going to be launching that hopefully in December, so that will create kind of a global digital community, and then have the select Dunbar's number, qualified 150, and then so hopefully people can feel a part of this movement in the grander scale through that digital app.
What's the estimated time of arrival for that?
December is our goal.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I just had a meeting with the team, and I said we got to get this launched in December. So hopefully it'll be out then.
What a great way to begin 2021.
That's right. 2021 is going to be a good year, everybody.
Yeah, well, I think it's I think 2021, my intuitive sense is it's when we've now had enough exposure to both sides of the equation, both sides of the argument. People have had enough being locked down, enough having their sex life screwed up, enough people walk into their living room and steal shit, that we finally collectively say, okay, let's do something about this. And, 2021 equals 5. So numerologically, 5s are always tipping points. You're halfway between the beginning and the end of a cycle or an octave. And so there's usually a fair bit of chaos. So I have a feeling that 2021 there's going to be this sort of the chaos of transition of people finally, getting out there and beginning the hero's journey and finding that path through the jungle.
I think this winter, I would be prepared to buckle up for this winter. I think this winter is going to be a challenge with whatever happens with the election, whatever happens with, a lot of people coming down with flu symptoms in the winter, as they always do.
And being labeled COVID.
And then all the things that are going to happen and the reaction that the government, the opportunity for them to exert more control because the numbers are going to go up and people's immune systems are going to be depressed because they're not getting as much sun and all the things that happen in the winter anyways. I think we're going to have a bit of a rocky winter, I would say, but I think we're going to come out of that spring, and it's going to be a new looking world, come spring.
And I would say if everything you just said is true, then we also need to be conscious not to react violently and to use the capacity for peaceful protest, because if we start having peaceful protests where we can have dance, music, relationship, sharing, connection, all the things that make being human fun, and use those as opportunities to share ideas and get inspired by others with great ideas, that we can actually use a legal mandate, a nonviolent protest as a means of connecting. And I think if we create tribe through that, it's going to be far better, because as you know, when people start reaching critical levels of stress, people get shot, overdoses, violence. And I think we want to avoid becoming the kind of people that we're trying to help heal.
Absolutely. And, and one of the great practices and we talked about it on the last podcast I did with you is the darkness retreat, where, and there's not a lot of options to get that now. And I'm hoping, as my journey progresses, to be able to actually seed fund and create some different darkness retreats here in the US, but we can do that with a little bit of handyman work, we can turn our room into a dark room. Like, it's okay to go into the womb. If things are like, go into the womb, go inside yourself, find that place of, where we crawl into our own proverbial cave that we create and commune with our soul and emerge. And, the world will still be standing. It's not at that level.
Yeah.
I think all the people who are scrambling to buy every bit of ammunition possible.
Yeah, that's a little over the top.
It's not going to get to that level at all, and I think really just the most important thing is the internal work. Like, let's take this opportunity, no matter how gnarly it gets in the winter, let's do the internal work and then, show up.
And, speaking of the womb and the concept of the sweat lodge and detoxification, cleaning up, most of us have a bathtub and a good hot bath and some Epsom salts and maybe some prayers that work for you and a time to just really be with yourself and with the energy and the spirit of the water as a cleanse and just, sort of like reset. Like when our computers start getting weird, we reboot them. I think if we sit in a hot bath and let ourselves sweat and experience the discomfort of some good solid heat, but also take that time to sweat it out and really have time with ourselves, there's a great way to enter the womb, but kind of go through a miniature rebirthing process and say, okay, now that I'm clear about what doesn't serve me anymore and what I can do in the world, I'm going to emerge from this bath as a initiate of a new order and go out and be that person.
I fill myself with love. I give it all away.
Yes.
You started singing that in the sauna that day, and I still have that in mind. And that's one of the prayers that I always offer when I'm in the lodge.
Yes.
As I get people singing that.
Yeah. I am happy, I am healthy, I am whole. I take my love wherever I go because I'm happy and I'm healthy and I'm whole. I take my love wherever I go. Hey, what a great pleasure, bud.
Yeah, man. Always.
Thank you.
Thank
Hope
you,
you
brother.
guys enjoyed it. Our goal is not to incite violence, nor is it to get you to break the law. But we are encouraging you to do a healthy protest.
Show up.
And hug each other and kiss each other, and you don't need to have sex through a hole in the wall. There can be a tent for that at your process. And hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you to my sponsors for all your love and support. Thank you to all of you who buy things through the podcast using your discount codes, because that provides the support I need to keep finding the most amazing minds I can, like Aubry, and finding my way to their doorsteps and them to mine. So lots of love. Thanks for sharing. If you love the podcast, remember, share it with everyone. If you don't, it's our secret.
Thanks, everybody. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Aubrey Marcus. Applications are currently being accepted for the 2021 Fit for Service Fellowship online at aubrymarcus.com. The Fit for Service Fellowship was started as a mastermind to help train individuals to become more fit to serve the world. It has evolved into much more. It is for those of you who are not content with playing small, and for those of you that are eager to take back your sovereign power, your birthright as a human being. If this sounds like you, visit Aubrey's website for more details, aubrymarcus.com. You can also follow Aubrey on Instagram or Twitter at Aubrey Marcus, or listen to Aubrey's own podcast, the Aubrey Marcus Podcast, available on all good podcast channels. Follow Paul on Instagram and Twitter at Living4D Podcast, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/Living4D with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com and the Chek Institute's new streaming media site, chekiva.com.